On behalf of the officers of the Manitoba-Saskatchewan Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, I want to express our pain and sadness at seeing the social upheaval in the world right now. Our hearts ache with the pain suffered by so many as a result of the injustice brought to bear on George Floyd and others, and the resulting turmoil in its wake. His death, and that of many others before him, was unnecessary and repugnant. No person should be subjected to abuse, intolerance, hatred, violence, mistrust, or disregard because of their race or any other characteristics. There is only one race, the human one. We are all made in the image of God, and it is for us as Adventist Christians to model this in action as well as word. Even as we work to craft this statement, we recognize that it will probably not fully or even accurately express the feelings or views of everyone. We realize that unless one has been personally subjected to unjust treatment, to prejudice, scorn, hate, oppression, and even violence, or belongs to a group of people who have historically and systemically been treated thus, he cannot know the angst of one who has. To any who belong to a class of people who have primarily and historically been recipients of better conditions or greater privilege, we say two things. First, you must realize that with greater privilege comes greater responsibility. Secondly, even if it is in your heart to change, you will likely spend the rest of your life trying to listen to the plight of those who have been oppressed, attempting to learn about their lives and their stories, and you will still stumble at times, unintentionally offend those you love, and in ignorance speak ill of those whom you never met. This is because, at its root, the race problem is really part of the sin problem, and no amount of re-education and good intentions will bring lasting change except when God's Spirit dwells within us. Indeed, we must look to Christ himself for an example. I'd like to share with you two quotations from the writings of Ellen White which provide us guidance in these turbulent times, even as we suffer the pain of the wounds of our nation, as well as of the United States. From The Desire of Ages, page 509, we read, "The government under which Jesus lived was corrupt and oppressive. On every hand were crying abuses, extortion, intolerance, and grinding cruelty. Yet the Savior attempted no civil reforms. He attacked no national abuses, nor condemned the national enemies. He did not interfere with the authority or administration of those in power. He who was our example kept aloof from earthly governments, not because he was indifferent to the woes of men, but because the remedy did not lie in merely human and external measures. To be efficient, the cure must reach men individually and must regenerate the heart." And from the Testimonies for the Church, Volume 9, page 218, again and again Christ had been asked to decide legal and political questions, but he refused to interfere in temporal matters. Christ stood in our world as the head of the great spiritual kingdom that he came to our world to establish, the kingdom of righteousness. His teaching made plain the ennobling, sanctifying principles that govern this kingdom. He showed that justice and mercy and love are the controlling powers in Jehovah's kingdom. It is not always a simple matter to follow this counsel and Christ's example. We may not always comment publicly on many things that speak to the obvious social and political brokenness in our world, but we are and ought to be deeply concerned for helping those who suffer. We believe firmly that the ultimate remedy to these social and political ills shall be found in the everlasting kingdom of Jesus Christ at his soon return. When we issue statements such as this, our overriding goal is, to the best of our abilities, reflect the character of Christ. In that light, it means that on the one hand, we must seek to avoid politics and public controversy, and on the other hand, beyond any public statement, it may mean there is something for us to do. We have no right to silently stand by and watch others be mocked, belittled, or abused. We understand that the gospel is based on attraction rather than promotion. And though it can sometimes be challenging to apply this principle, we must always be sensitive to it. The real remedy for the tragedies that are occurring around us in Canada, the United States, and around the world is the love of Christ planted in the heart.